This is a journey unlike any other, a 10-episode story of silence, strength, and transformation inspired by the timeless wisdom of Billy Graham. Watch closely as one man's disappearance becomes a powerful lesson on how focusing on yourself and embracing silence can change everything. Episode 1, The Vanishing Point. The morning Elias disappeared was unremarkable: gray skies, cold coffee, and deadlines stacking like unpaid bills. No storm clouds. No dramatic music. Just a man quietly reaching the edge of his soul. He slipped out of his apartment just before sunrise. No note. No goodbye text. His keys left behind on the windowsill, next to a worn copy of Billy Graham's Peace with God, its pages dog-eared and underlined in blue ink. One phrase was circled 3 times: God never leads us anywhere He can't sustain us. To those around him, Elias had it all. A fast-rising creative career, a brilliant mind, charm that turned heads in every room. But beneath that shine lived exhaustion. And a deeper ache he never let anyone see. Expectations weighed like concrete. Betrayals whispered behind smiles. His heart had become a battleground between ambition and emptiness. And then, silence. Calls went unanswered. Meetings missed. Social media accounts deleted. Friends knocked on his door. No answer. Naomi, the woman who once believed she'd marry him, stared at his apartment from across the street, heart pounding. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just whispered to no one, "He's gone." But not everyone was shocked. 3 days after his disappearance, Elias's closest friend, Caleb, found an envelope slid under his door. Inside, a handwritten letter in Elias's sharp, steady pen, "To build, I must vanish." That was it. No return address. No date. Just 5 words, cryptic, deliberate, final. Caleb read the note over and over again, trying to make sense of it. Was Elias in trouble? Running from something? Or worse, planning not to return? He didn't know it yet. But those 5 words would become a riddle whispered across boardrooms, blogs, and broken relationships. Because Elias's silence wasn't just his own. It had begun to echo through the lives of everyone who thought they knew him. Episode 2, Echoes of Judgment. The silence didn't stay still. It moved, slithered, twisted, expanded, until it wrapped itself around every person Elias had left behind. At first, there was concern. His co-workers at the farm whispered in hushed tones. Maybe he burned out. Maybe he had a breakdown. Naomi received a few half-hearted texts, "Have you heard from him? He ghosted the Monday pitch, totally unlike him." But worry quickly morphed into something meaner. Within a week, compassion gave way to convenience. Elias's name was wiped from project credits. A junior associate took his office. Management issued a statement implying he had left abruptly and unprofessionally. The vacuum he left behind demanded a scapegoat, and Elias was it. His silence was no longer interpreted as peace. It was twisted into cowardice. One afternoon, Naomi stood at the coffee shop where Elias used to write every morning. His corner table was taken by a stranger. She scrolled through her phone, numb, until she found a headline that punched the breath out of her: "Creative prodigy Elias Gray cracks under pressure," sources say. The article cited anonymous co-workers, insider friends, and even his ex-mentor, all painting Elias as unstable, dramatic, and emotionally erratic. And yet, as the narrative turned against him, something strange began happening. On a small, obscure blog dedicated to art and philosophy, a piece was posted under no name. A breathtaking essay about stillness, ego, and spiritual resilience. Naomi read it twice, heart thudding. The cadence. The word choices. The final line: "The loudest voice in the room rarely knows peace. The quiet one, he's building something." It was Elias. It had to be. The next day, another piece appeared, this time, a short story about a man who walked into the forest not to hide, but to hear God's voice again. These anonymous posts began to circulate in creative circles, praised for their depth and originality. Some called it a comeback under a new identity. Others dismissed it as someone imitating Elias's once great style. But Naomi knew better. She printed the second story, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the back of Elias's old book. He was speaking. Just not the way the world expected. Episode 3, The Woman Who Waited. Naomi never believed in science. She was a pragmatist, a planner. But since Elias disappeared, her dreams had turned strange. Each night, he returned not as the man she knew, but as someone quieter, almost untouchable. In the dreams, he wore white. Not a suit, not pajamas. Something timeless. He never spoke. He only watched her, eyes full of both apology and peace. She would wake up with the covers tangled around her legs and her heart thudding like she'd heard a sermon in her sleep. In the waking world, Naomi had become a ghost herself, floating through her days, half-present. Friends told her to move on. Her sister suggested therapy. Her co-worker at the law firm gave her a playlist called Closure Vibes. But Naomi didn't want closure. She wanted the truth. One stormy afternoon, she found herself in Elias's apartment. She hadn't returned since the day he vanished, but Caleb still had the spare key. The air smelled like dust and the faintest trace of his cologne. Everything was just as he'd left it, meticulously neat, obsessively organized. Elias was always chasing clarity. Naomi drifted toward his bookshelf. Her fingers brushed over the familiar titles, C.S. Lewis, Malcolm Gladwell, and a dozen one-sermon compilations by Billy Graham. One particular book, The Secret of Happiness, caught her attention not because of the title, but because of what was hidden inside it. Tucked between the pages was a folded sheet of paper, worn at the edges. Naomi opened it slowly, afraid to breathe. It was a sermon. Highlighted and underlined in bold strokes. Elias's handwriting was unmistakable. But what chilled her was the date written at the top corner, one day after he disappeared. That meant he had the book with him wherever he had gone, and then somehow returned it. She sat down hard on his couch, staring at the message he had silently left behind. The world will tempt you to explain. But God whispers, be still. In stillness, your enemies defeat themselves. Her fingers trembled. This wasn't madness. This wasn't abandonment. This was a decision. Elias hadn't run away. He had walked into silence, like a man walking into sacred fire. And she had no idea who he'd be when, or if, he returned. Episode 4, The Return of the Wrong Man. The day he arrived, the office was buzzing with a nervous energy no one could explain. A man walked through the doors with the confident stride of someone who owned the place, but his face was unfamiliar. Crisp suit, impeccable manners, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Martin Graves, the new representative of Elias Gray. No one knows where Elias is, Martin said smoothly during the emergency meeting called by HR, but I'm here to carry forward his vision and his legacy. Whispers flooded the room. Some were skeptical. Others curious. Naomi watched from the sidelines, her gut tightening. Martin spoke about partnerships, upcoming projects, and bold new directions. He made promises about saving the firm's reputation and revitalizing Elias's stalled work. But every time Naomi tried to catch his eye, he looked away, or offered a rehearsed, empty smile. That night, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She arranged a private meeting with Martin in a quiet cafe, the kind Elias used to love. Who are you really? She demanded softly. Where is Elias? Why are you speaking for him? Martin leaned in, a voice low but steady. Elias asked me to do this, he confessed, sliding a worn envelope across the table. He said silence needs a voice until it's ready to roar. Naomi unfolded the envelope slowly. Inside was a note, penned in Elias's unmistakable handwriting, trust no one until the silence speaks. Martin looked up, eyes locked on hers. Elias isn't ready to come back. But the world can't wait forever. Naomi felt a shiver run down her spine. This man wasn't just a placeholder. He was part of something bigger. A silent storm brewing in the shadows. Was Martin a friend, or the very threat Elias had vanished to escape? Episode 5, The Cave of Becoming. The world outside had faded to a distant hum, replaced by the whisper of wind through pine needles and the steady crackle of a fire in a small cabin deep within the wilderness. Elias had found a refuge far from the relentless noise of ambition and accusation. Here, stripped of his titles and his past, he faced himself like never before. Morning light spilled through the cabin's single window, illuminating a table scattered with journals, pens, and a worn cassette player looping Billy Graham's sermons. His voice echoed softly, a bomb against the silence. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. Each day Elias rose early, pouring himself into rituals of prayer, reflection, and physical toil. He chopped wood, tended a small garden, and journaled his thoughts with painstaking honesty. But the quiet wasn't empty. It was here, in the stillness, that Elias uncovered the sharpest wound of all. Leafing through old letters and emails saved on a battered laptop he'd brought with him, he found signs of sabotage, quiet, deliberate acts from someone he once trusted completely. A rival disguised as a friend who'd undermined his breakthrough just before his disappearance. The betrayal stung, but it also clarified something. Buried beneath years of doubt, silence wasn't just refuge, it was armor. Elias closed the laptop and looked outside, where the trees stood tall and unyielding against the sky. He whispered, almost to himself, to build, I must vanish. But to rise, I must forgive. The decision wasn't easy. Forgiveness was a fire to walk through, but it was also the bridge back to strength. As night deepened, Elias wrote in his journal, in the quiet, I rebuild not what I lost, but what I was meant to become. The man who had vanished was dying. The one who would emerge would be something else entirely. Episode 6, The Fire and the Forgiveness. Back in the city, the air was thick with tension. News of Elias's disappearance had rippled through social circles, mutating into accusations and whispered vendettas. Naomi stood at the center of a storm she hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. Her gaze hardened as she faced Derek, the man who had once been Elias's closest confidant. Now revealed as the architect of his downfall. The confrontation wasn't just about betrayal, it was about reclaiming dignity from the ashes of deceit. You thought you could bury him, Naomi said, in voice steady but fierce. But you underestimated what silence can build. Derek smirked, the arrogance of a man who believed he'd won. Elias is gone. No one remembers the real him anymore. I did the city a favor. But just as Derek prepared to savor his victory, his phone buzzed. He unfolded a letter, its elegant script unmistakable. I forgive you. But I'm not coming back the same. Naomi watched as color drained from Derek's face, his empire of lies cracking under the weight of those words. Elias's forgiveness was not weakness, it was a declaration of power. A silent blaze burning through the darkness Derek had tried to cast. As the city buzzed with rumors and battles over truth, Naomi felt a shift, not just in the world around her, but in herself. She wasn't waiting for Elias to return. She was becoming the voice of his silence. Episode 7, The Emergence. Elias stepped back into the city as if walking through a dream, a ghost drifting silently among the living. No fanfare. No announcements. No demands. Just the soft cadence of footsteps on rain-soaked pavement. His eyes held a calm no one had seen before, an unshakable peace carved from months of solitude and silent struggle. The world around him rushed forward, chasing headlines and hashtags, but Elias moved at his own sacred pace. Whispers followed him like shadows. Old friends stared, unsure whether to embrace the man who vanished or the stranger who returned. Enemies scowled, trying to read weakness in his quiet. Naomi watched, heart aching and hope stirring, as the man she loved became someone new. Something remarkable began to happen. People softened. The rivals who once sought to cut him down hesitated. The colleagues who doubted found themselves reflecting in his silence. Even Derek, once so sure of his victory, felt the walls of his certainty crumble. Naomi's voice broke the hush one evening as they walked beneath the city lights. You didn't change the world, she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. You changed us. Elias smiled gently, saying nothing. His silence was louder than any declaration. He wasn't here to prove himself. He was here to embody a truth that words could never capture. Episode 8, The Mirror of Power. The city lights shimmered like distant stars, but Elias's gaze was fixed inward, unmoved by the glittering promises laid at his feet. Offers poured in, lucrative deals, flashing cameras, whispered invitations to exclusive circles. The very power he once chased was now within reach, glowing like a flame begging to be touched. But Elias did not reach out. Instead, he looked beyond the surface, the mirror that reflected ambition, ego, and the hunger for control. In the boardroom where his absence had left a gaping hole, he made a choice that stunned everyone. He turned down every offer. Then without a word, he extended his hand to Martin Graves, the man who had once been his rival, the one who tried to destroy him. The room fell silent. Martin's eyes widened in disbelief, then flickered with something like hope. Elias spoke, but only in gestures and steady calm, "This is your chance." It was a passing of the torch wrapped in forgiveness and quiet strength. The man everyone had written off was suddenly the keeper of Elias's legacy. Power wasn't seized here. It was gifted. And in that gift lay a deeper truth: is sometimes the greatest strength comes from breaking the cycle of revenge and stepping into grace. Episode 9, The Storm That Doesn't Move Him. The city was ablaze, not with light, but with whispers of scandal. Shadows stretched across headlines, rumors clung to conversations like smoke. Elias stood at the eye of the storm. An explosive allegation linked him to Martin Graves' secret of deals, dark deals painted in the hues of corruption and betrayal. The media demanded answers. Friends recoiled. Enemies sharpened their knives. For the first time in over a year, Elias was confronted not by silence, but by a roar. Calls flooded his phone, emails stacked higher than the windowsills of his apartment. But Elias did not falter. He refused to engage in the chaos. The storm raged on, threatening to tear down everything he had rebuilt in quiet. And then, on a crisp morning drenched in heavy fog, Elias stepped forward, calm, composed, unwavering. Before a crowd hungry for spectacle, he spoke, not to defend, not to accuse, but to declare a truth forged in silence: "Your storm can't move what was built in silence." The words landed like a stone skipping across still water, rippling deeper than any shouted defense could. In that moment, the city began to understand: Elias had not returned to fight with noise. He had come back to stand unshaken. The storm still raged, but it no longer threatened to uproot him. Episode 10, The Thunder Without a Sound. Naomi stood at the edge of the city's park, the soft rustle of leaves the only sound beneath the fading twilight. Her voice, steady and filled with quiet reverence, carried over memories etched deep. Elias wasn't just a man who vanished. He was a man who chose silence, because sometimes the loudest thunder comes without a sound. The world had shifted beneath their feet since his return. Enemies had been reconciled, mentors inspired, and old wounds began to heal, not by clamor, but by calm. Lives touched in ways no one expected. Ideas sparked in quiet rooms. Strength built in solitude became a beacon for those lost in noise. And then, as the city held its breath, Elias vanished once more. But this time, it wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. From his silence rose a movement, one teaching others the sacred art of stillness, the power of focus, and the grace of patience. Naomi smiled softly, knowing the path wasn't easy. The world would still scream. But now, others had learned that in silence, power waits. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to become everything. The thunder roared without a sound.